Welcome to Taking Healthy Back with Maria, with your host, Maria Malec, experience coach, conscience educator, and destination retreat host, presents to you countless ways to overcome an overwhelmed, overprocessed, and over-medicated lifestyle. She'll be covering everything wellness, from getting more from life than you put into it, destination retreats to healthy cooking and conscious education. So please welcome the host of Taking Healthy Back with Maria.
Welcome, everybody, to Taking Healthy Back with Maria. I'm your host, Maria Malec. Today, we have another good topic, the silent cost of overgiving and how to stop. This is a really good one because I know I have been stuck in that my own self. We have Coach Amira, who dives into the hidden tolls of overgiving and the profound impact it has on your mental, emotional, and physical well-being. She unpacks why overgiving often feels noble, but leads to burnout and disconnection. Through her personal insights, Amira shows you how to reclaim your energy, rebuild your relationships, and embrace healthy boundaries without guilt. However, or discover how to stop overgiving, honor your needs, and create a balanced, fulfilling life. Welcome, Amira.
Thank you so much for having me here. I feel my heart is so warm, so full. I've been so happy
Oh,
to connect with you, and it's such an honor.
thank you. Thank you. I feel the same way. You're so lovely. And, this is a really important topic because I think at some point, most people are caught in a cycle of overgiving, whether it's to prove themselves or just to feel more valuable, to be heard, whatever it is. So my first question is, what does taking healthy back mean to you, and how does your work support this mission?
Yes, that's just a great question. For me, as a coach and as a coach who focuses on boundary setting, I truly believe taking healthy back is placing healthy boundaries and knowing how to implement them in a healthy way, non-toxic. One thing that all of my clients will let you know is that boundaries are not here to set up a wall and separate you from people, but to create more intimacy so that you can grow more together. And so a lot of times we find ourselves doing more of the separation than the intimacy building. And in reality, setting boundaries is so that you can be the best that you can, so you can pour the best quality of yourself to others, but while giving that back to you. So it's a reciprocal thing. And so I think that that's the beginning of taking healthy right back to you.
I love that. And a lot of people have asked me, well, what do you mean taking back? Because I believe we've been robbed in so many ways from so many different industries. I don't need to name them, but we all know who they are. And there's a lot of people out there just becoming wandering generalities because they don't know who they are and they don't know how to put up those boundaries. I'm included in that. I've gotten better, yet I have been caught in that overgiving trap. My
Yes,
next
it's very
question,
easy.
yeah, and I'm guessing that's why you do what
Why
you
you do what
do.
you do.
Have you
Have
over?
you over
Let's start there. Have
there?
you
Have you
overcome
overcome
um,
um,
unhealthy boundaries and how it led you here? I think. Hold on a second, Amira. Hey, everybody, thanks for hanging with us. We had a little voice tech difficulty, but we're back. We're back. I asked Amira, in what ways, well, I don't remember which one I asked. So do you,
No, it's okay. So I think you were asking me, how did boundaries, become a part of my life?
great.
And yes, and so I grew up in a home where boundaries were not respected. And so that was kind of the first role model for me when it came to boundaries. And so as I started to, become an adult and go into spaces and having professional relationships and also intimate relationships, I kept modeling that behavior, but I found myself in constant burnout. And then as I started to develop my own business and I became a birth doula and a postpartum doula and a bereavement doula, I started to realize that I loved what I was doing, which is such a treasure. Not many people get to wake up every day and say, I absolutely love going to work. But I
Mm,
realized in that midst of being so in love, I was still burning out. And I was giving myself and my little one at the time the very least of myself. So I realized something needed to change. And so as I started to dive into what I was ultimately doing was teaching my clients how to create boundaries with their medical teams, create boundaries with their family members and even their partners. I wasn't really doing that for myself either. I was just giving
mm,
and giving. And as a healer, many people know this, you just feel like you can because we're created to do this. But in reality, I realized the better quality of my healing came when I was healing myself and I was giving to myself. And so no became a favorite word because I knew I was helping them at the same time. So it was something truly beautiful. It was a hard journey, but at the end it was well resulted. And so now I am in a space where I help not only just my birthing clients, but I help other clients outside of the birthing world be able to recognize those boundaries. Where are those areas that you're getting frustrated in? Where are those areas where you find yourself getting almost bitter, resentful,
mm,
angry? Right. And I said, okay, we're now recognizing that boundary. And then how do we have the language to implement it? A lot of times we just figure out what our boundaries are. And we're just like, hey, you need to stop doing this. And that's my boundary. And that's just
mm.
nobody likes to be taught that. Right. And nobody likes change. Everybody takes a little bit of time to realize that change. So having that really great, healthy language to be able to implement those healthy boundaries go a really long way. So that's something that I recognized in my own life.
I'm actually wearing a shirt that said "All words matter."
Oh, I love
So I'm
that.
I'm I'm
Yes.
really like you in that conscious language is huge for me. And when I start hearing the things that maybe I used to say or hear other people say, it actually kind of hurts a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
ooh, that's not feeling right in my spirit. And
Yes.
I'm going to ask you a question on something base that you said. What's your advice for someone who feels guilty every time they say no, even when it's the right choice?
Ooh, that's such a good one. That's a great, great
A
question.
hard one,
And
hard.
it is. It's very challenging. Something that I suffered with myself because I thought giving was the ultimate best. And it's something that I recognize in a lot of my clients. It's the first thing we actually tackle. And in reality, it's a mind shift. If you're able to shift your mind to understand, I'm not taking away from somebody, I'm actually giving them something. You start to want to
Mm,
give more. So when we
right.
understand a boundary setting is not, I'm taking away time from you or I'm taking myself out of the relationship, I'm actually creating a boundary so that way I don't disrespect you or I don't feel like I'm losing energy, become bitter and angry towards you. You get the worst of me. Or if it's your clients, we realize that a lot of professionals, about 65% of them, are going through burnout and the quality of their service starts to go all the way down. So, do we want better quality for our
Good
clients?
one.
Of course we do. We want to give the best. When we look at our businesses, we create these businesses. It's a lot of work to do it. So, we obviously want to give the best. But if you start to realize, okay, the more I say no, the better quality of yeses I have, the
Mm,
less guilt I have, because I understand, because I'm a healer, because I'm a giver, I'm giving the best of me. So it's a
right.
present, it's a gift when I say no. And when you shift your
Oh,
mindset in that way, you say, oh, I'm so excited to say no. I can't wait because I know it's a gift for them too.
and we're hearing it all the time, more so now than ever, is like, got to change your mindset, got to change your mindset. I know what that means. I use it all the time, but how do you explain to someone who's like, well, I don't know how these, I've been thinking these thoughts for 30 years. How do I actually change it without going in and turning a dial or cutting that piece out of me? How do you explain to your clients how to actually change the mindset? Is it just consistency of thinking new thoughts? I'd like to hear your take.
Yes, I would definitely say it's conscious living. It's intentional living. So going into a space of, okay, writing down the problems or challenges, right, that we are finding or encountering in our relationships, and then
Mhm.
seeing what do I need to do to bridge that gap to get to the other side. And then becoming
Mm,
mindful. So creating practices, of course, of like meditation and prayer, getting into a space of breathing techniques. I think when we start to implement these tools, we'll be able to be more present and intentional so that way we can see that old way of thinking and the new way of thinking together in a tangible way and
mm,
understand when we're navigating into that old way and understanding I don't want those results. So if you know deep inside, I don't want to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, which is insanity. So I want to do something new, then I have to be intentional about it. Now, one is also giving yourself grace. You know you can't change over a day. Rome wasn't built in one day, right? We hear that over and over again. So understanding that, yes, there is a consistency to this. So intentionality, conscious living, and then
mm.
doing it day to day with grace. So knowing, okay, next time when I find myself implementing those boundaries, make sure I take a deep breath in. I know my why, I have clear language, and I speak with grace. And then I do that over and over again, it becomes an easier thing than a forced thing. So it becomes easier, it becomes a way of life.
Wow, that is such a beautiful, clear, and simple explanation. And I absolutely love it. I subscribe to the same thing. So I know what you're talking about. It really resonates with me. And the beginning to anything is awareness
Yes.
that, oh, I did it again. Oh, I said it again. And you have maybe a second or two to course correct,
Yes.
and then, and I even erase it in the air. I said, ooh, I take that back and I
I
erase it
love that.
as like a physical thing to go along with the mental thing. And Amira and I are in a beautiful quantum group, quantum thinking, quantum health group, and we talk about this all the time, that once you become aware of it, you just sit and pause and listen to your body, listen to what you're getting from that. Is it making you feel good or not? And then you can make the decision in that moment. Oh yeah, I remember. Like for me, one of the things I'm working on is not cussing, because I
Mm.
could have a trucker's mouth. I'm completely transparent.
I
Sometimes
love
I can
it.
talk that way, but now every time I want to, I may say the word with the same first letter, but I change the letter. Or I mean, I
Oh,
change the word,
beautiful.
to be something not as offensive. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
So yeah, and that brings me to think that's a boundary that I'm setting for myself. So I think what I'd love for you to explain is, we're always talking about boundaries with other people. What about our own boundaries with ourselves?
Yes, that's a really important question. And it's
Mm,
something that I really love to dive into with my clients because a lot of times we're so ready. We go through, I understand where my boundaries are, I understand what's frustrating me. I have the language, and now I'm exercising the implementation of it, right? But then what we realize is that if we don't have a commitment to our boundaries, there is no value or weight to the boundary that we're actually implementing. So there
Mm,
has to come to an understanding that if I don't even honor my boundary, how can I expect others to really honor it
right.
also?
I like.
Right? So then we have to come back to the sense of, am I worthy of this boundary? A lot of times we don't implement a boundary because we don't feel like we're worthy enough to implement it, right? Oh, well,
Mhm.
it's not fair that I'm taking this away from this person. We've had this relationship for so long. Or I don't want to disappoint this person. But we have to come back to ourselves and say, am I worthy of rest? Yes, I am worthy of rest. Am I
Mhm.
deserving of self care days? Yes, I am deserving of self care days. Am I deserving of someone treating me right and saying beautiful words to me or letting them know that they're frustrated but not disrespecting me? Yes, I am worthy. So when we start living in that space of worthiness, it's the same thing as if we valued a house or a car. We make sure people, if they get in our car, hey, don't eat in my car. That's a
Right.
boundary, right? And we're very quick to implement that boundary and uphold it. But when it comes to ourselves, do we value ourselves just as much as the car, as the new laptop, as the
Mhm.
new house, or our
Mm,
dog, right? Our dogs, we love our dogs, we love our pet animals. We should love ourselves just as much. And so it comes back into the relationship with you. And that takes time to
mhm.
observe. How are we speaking to ourselves? How's that little voice in our head? Are we rough? Are we graceful with ourselves? If not, shifting again that mindset and being intentional and being aware of how we're communicating. What language are we giving ourselves? Once we start self loving more and understanding I'm God's creation, God's creation loves me, right? And I am worthy and I'm valuable and all of these things, you start moving with value and it doesn't
Mhm.
become a second thought. And then you're able to then uphold the boundary and respect the boundaries that you place because you know you're worthy of them. And so
Mm,
is the other person, right? And then the really cool thing about this is that then you start respecting others' boundaries because you too understand how valuable boundaries are. So respect is like, it's almost like a
mm,
double-edged sword, right? I
right.
respect mine, and so therefore it will be easy for me to respect yours.
Right. And it basically goes back to the golden rule, do unto others, right? I think
Yeah.
it's important to mention that when we make a decision to do something like this, which could be really huge for someone, that when you make the decision, you make the intention, and you start living in this new way, disruption is going to happen. Old
Yes.
thoughts are going to come back in. And I like to tell people that the disruption is good because you're breaking things up. It's like a clog in a drain. It's being broken up. Some of the stuff
Yes.
may backwash, so to speak, before it actually goes down. And I like to give visuals. And then also, sometimes we feel alone and in the dark. And I also like to tell people a seed must first be planted, and then a seed, the roots go down before the plant comes up.
Oof.
And when you see those kind of visuals, it's like, oh, okay, so this dark period, this difficult period, I think it's probably hard for a seed to come out of that little shell, to
Yes.
break
Yes.
through. And why we could get so many lessons in nature just for this alone. So I
Yes.
love the way you said it. You're a great teacher.
Oh, thank you. And you
Why do
give
you?
great illustrations.
Oh, thank you. I love doing that. Why do you think so many people equate boundaries with conflict instead of connection?
Oh, yes. I blame the internet. You
Oh,
know,
good one. Me too.
yes,
Sometimes.
yes, we have fallen into which I call, and they have also mentioned the cutoff culture. So we've started to step into boundary setting. If you look at a few years ago when we started to really get aware into therapy, we weren't always very fond of therapy or, psychology and all of these things. we weren't very keen to understanding that implementing boundaries are not wall setting. But that's kind of how we stepped into it, and especially in the introduction into social media. It became the cutoff culture. Well, if you can't respect me, I'm going to cut you off. I'm going to block you. You got to get out of my life. It
Mm,
shouldn't be this way.
right.
It shouldn't be that hard. We started to give this kind of like pseudoscience, as you would, right? In reality, that isn't why. And that's why I felt like I really needed to step into the boundary world to begin with, because I felt like we were looking at it from a wrong perspective. I think that sometimes, and a lot of times, we have to hold ourselves accountable for the things that we have allowed to happen, right?
Good
And so,
point.
therefore,
Yeah.
right? No one has made you give this much time. No one has made you said yes countless of times when you knew you didn't have it. No one
Right.
is forcing you into certain circumstances that you know that you can't offer. So there has to be an accountability for yourself first. And then also understand that we're in relationship. It takes two, right? So I need to have grace for the other person who's used to me conducting myself in a certain manner, giving a certain space, and then the same way I would like grace, that person deserves grace as well. And so, and then it brings me into that space of our language. A lot of us haven't been given that language. It hasn't been modeled for us. For example, as I mentioned, while I
Right.
was growing up, that language was never there. It was just you are the problem. This is what I see. You need to
Mm,
fix it. And in reality, what I tell my clients and the things that I really teach is inviting someone into the conversation, saying, I really notice that when we have these conversations, you tend to get really angry and disrespect me. And that doesn't make me feel good. See, you point it back to yourself and you
mm,
say, how can we work together? You're inviting that person in. How
yeah.
can we work together to get into a space that maybe I give you more space before you speak to me? Or we can change the language, right? Because that may be okay for you, but it's not okay for me. You see, so we're not pointing the
Mm,
finger, but we're
mm.
using ourselves as an example and then holding ourselves accountable for what we've allowed. So I think that's a really great tool that we can utilize so that way we can understand that it's a connection building, it's relationship building, and that takes a lot of time.
Communication.
Rela-
Yeah.
Yes, relationships are not easy. That's why holding a marriage together for 20 plus years, it should be given an award because it's not something that's very easy to sustain, right? So I think when we go into that mindset of understanding it's about connection and not separation, we tend to find ways to get closer together and not just close the door on someone.
Mm. I have a saying that I love to say: change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change. And you
Ooh,
just changed my whole thought process on boundaries, because hearing that word does connotate some negative triggers for a
yeah.
lot of people, I'm sure. And I like what you said also about the internet. We have too much access to people and things, and we're reacting. No, we're, what's the word? Oh, we're reacting instead of responding. And we're letting everything that's happening outside of us affect us. And wow, that's so good. I hope whoever's watching, our four people, are getting something from this, because this is so important. And we have a commercial break, but when we get back, I want to talk about what was in our title is people who are over giving, and how we can give them some tips here on how to stop doing that, or at least get in the idea like, hey, I want to stop doing this because it's for my health, and then ultimately for the health of everybody we come in contact with. So we'll be back and we'll start on that next. Thank you. I think even a VA hospital, if you're a veteran, that they would have a program like this, you
You would
know.
think, yeah, you would think, but it's not as simple to resolve as it sounds, because you have to have the volunteer personnel, you have to have the
Mhm.
space, you have to, it's not just watching the dog, it's being able to take that dog to a veterinarian if it needs medical attention.
Mhm.
Um, there's just so many components to it. And I know this because we put the program together, and we've been learning as we've gone, because there's no one we can call and go, hey, how did you handle this? So I mean, we've really learned a lot, and I understand why it's not as easy as it's.
So, what lessons have you learned that you can impart with our listeners?
I would say without a doubt, the big lesson that I've learned in all this is the importance of the people that you choose to allow to be around you. That has been absolutely life. I know for whatever reason, I used to fancy myself as a great leader when I was growing up. I thought I was a leader amongst all the kids and all that stuff. But all I know is every time I hung around people that did drugs, I did drugs. And so I needed to understand that stepfather growing up, he'd always tell me, show me who your friends are and I'll show you who you are.
Welcome back, everybody. We are talking with Coach Amira. I love your name. I love saying it. And you're just as beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we ended with how to stop overgiving. And I know a lot of people who are stuck in this loop.
Yes, yes. It's a very detrimental cycle that we find ourselves in. And so, as we were mentioning before, a space of overgiving comes from a space that we've almost come from a space of trauma at times, and in saying, I didn't receive, so therefore I will give, right?
Oh,
And a lot of times we find ourselves in that cycle. And so that, for myself, for example, I grew up in a family who boundary settings was not very healthy role in the way that they would implement boundaries. And so I felt the way that I was raised, I wasn't heard enough, I wasn't loved, I wasn't really centered in that space. And so therefore, when I became a healer, I said, I'm just going to give all of this to my clients. I know they deserve, I wish I had someone that would do that for me. So therefore, I'm going to give, 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 give. And you can find yourself in that situation in many ways, maybe with your children. I didn't have a parent that was fully there, so you overgive to your children or your spouse, right? I didn't see that kind of parental role model with my, in relationship when it came to my parents. So therefore, I'm going to make sure I give all of myself into this marriage so it can be successful, right? But in essence, it's not a very realistic model. And so when we come into that space of understanding where did we lack, and if we can heal that trauma, then we step into the space of not trauma centered, we come into a space of healthy centered. So we first have to see where we lack, and then we say, okay, how can I give that to myself? And then once you have enough of that, then I can give it to others. But it's the same kind of concept when they say if you're drowning, you can't help another person drowning. So if I don't have enough of that, how can I give you more of that? Right? So again, that mind shift of I first need to give myself, I first need to get the air mask in the airplane so that I can put the air mask on someone else. You shift that mindset as a gift, as a present, and then you start to give from that space. Now, at times that can be really difficult because the guilt starts to come in. How can I start to place myself in this position where I start placing boundaries and I start saying no, even though I really need it, right? And we go right back into that self-worth. Am I valuable to be in this space? Yes. Am I valuable enough to receive all that I give my clients, right? That healing that I offer, the testimonials that I give, the preaching and ministry that I have on my YouTube channels, on my content, on my books that I've written. Are we giving that ourselves to us first? Because we have to walk the walk before we talk the talk.
yes.
So that's really important. So when we start to center that, we now realize, wait a minute, I'm not coming from a space of selfish. I'm coming from a place of self-full. And when I am full, it's the overflow that I'm able to give to others. And then you'll never feel like you're burning out and everyone's happy. So when you start to mind shift, and again, being intentional of this space first, okay, this is the space I was moving in, that was trauma centered, that was lack centered. Now I'm in a self-full place and I am overflowing and I can give to others. Now everyone's reaping the reward. And when you can step into that mindset, you no longer feel guilty because you understand the why. And the why is what's going to anchor you. The why is going to inspire you to say that no. The why is going to help you realize, wait a minute, I'm not hurting anybody. I'm actually loving everybody.
Whoa, that is so good. Another area of boundaries that I wanted to talk about is I know there's a lot of women out there, especially who lack
Yeah.
confidence with friendships, with potential partners, boyfriends, whatever, where they're always feel like they got to check in and they're like, hey, is our friendship good? Are we good? I haven't heard from you. Are you mad at me? And that kind of rolls into just second guessing ourselves. How can we help those people who are not feeling secure in themselves, where they have to question the relationships in their lives? And I know I've been
Yeah.
there too. And like, wait, I haven't heard from you. Something wrong. Did I do something? And how to help a person get out of doing that. And I'm asking for
Yes.
myself too.
Yes, I think we've all found ourselves there at some point in our lives. This is definitely a hard space. It can be a challenging space to break, especially of how we see ourselves. And maybe I always love to go to my clients and find the place. We need to name things. We need to understand where it started. So when
Mm,
we start to understand what was the first relationship that made me feel this way, we can start then diving deeper into the solution of how I can get out of that space. And then understand that these people that we have in our lives, these valued relationships, are not trying to reenact that. They're not trying to abandon you. They're not trying to leave you, but they also need to do social charge. They need to recharge their social battery, or they need a little bit of space to do self-care themselves. And so when we understand where it comes from, then we can process that. And then we can also then understand why we need it. And remember when we said, if we uphold our own boundaries, we can then respect other
mm,
boundaries,
good
right?
one.
So we first have to understand that boundary setting is important to us so that we can give the best of ourselves. And then when we understand that if someone else is not reaching out to us right away, maybe they need the best of themselves so they can give the
Oh,
best to us. So again, it's a mind shift of they're not leaving me, they're not abandoning me. They're not just leaving me on red. There must be something. So again, the language and the mind shift. So sometimes we
mm,
can communicate that. We can say, hey, just checking up on you. I wanted to know that if you were okay, I'm here if you need anything, right? But not starting to go into that turbulent cycle where we kind of say, oh, no one loves me. They have forgotten me. You see, I give so much and they just don't give as much. Now we're going into the space where we kind of bring ourselves into this dark, gloomy space and we start to
mm.
attack ourselves and attack the other person because it shows that that's where we're moving from. We're moving from a trauma centered space. So I really think it's really important to find where the target is, and then we
Mm.
can start seeing our relationships a bit clearer. And then that will help you engage with those relationships in a healthier way.
Wow. So many of us, though, have been lied to.
Yes.
And I guess, again, and I hate to be cliche, but does a lot of it come back to our relationship with either our mom or our dad?
Yes, yes. Nurture nature. That's the first thing that we learn in psychology. How your caretakers took care of you and the way
Mm.
that they modeled relationships with you is typically what you look for in a partner because the brain is trying to rectify that relationship. So you'll kind of find if you notice that, your mom was someone who kind of constantly criticized you, put you down, never really had much nice things to say. Maybe that was because her mother did it as well. You start to look for it in your next spouse. because the brain wants to rectify that relationship. So it's like, oh, we
Right.
have another opportunity to fix this. So you'll actually look for the person that abused you the most or caused the most hurt. And then you're wondering why am I in these cyclical relationships? It's because we haven't healed that part yet. So a lot of times we need to look over, or I would suggest to look over these relationships that we have with our caretakers and then try to heal that. Maybe if you can't speak to your caretaker, maybe writing letters for yourself
Mhm.
and for your caretaker and seeing what parts really hurt and then understanding that you deserve much more than that, right? And then how I can find a healthier connection versus trying to remodel that or find that so that I can heal it.
Gosh, that's a lot to unpack. And I'm trying to think if we know that that was bad and we're maybe unconsciously searching that out, that validation, and we know it's bad for us, why do we stay with it?
That is a great, great question. A lot of times we stay with it is because of that addiction, dopamine kind of serotonin cycle that we get into. Again, the brain is trying to rectify. So it's trying to go into it again and say, well, if I get myself into it, I can probably get it to nudge. I can
Mhm.
probably fix it this time around. But in reality, we also have an issue of letting go. We don't want it. We feel like if we let go of this person, then we are ultimately almost giving up on our parents or giving up on our mom, giving up on our dad, giving up on whatever relationship that might be. But in the reality of it, if we don't switch that up, and if we keep finding these kind of relationships, again, we're doing insanity, which is trying to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And we don't know when to cut our losses. Now, again, not every relationship needs to be cut off, right? Sometimes we
Right.
just need a little bit of help from a coach, from a therapist, or a psychologist. Again, these are three separate things, and they can be very helpful and give you those tools to understand where the cycle is. Where is it that you're trying to compute? Because sometimes with trauma, there is a separation in personality of who you are and what happened to you and how you can get to the end result, right? So you're almost fractured. So we need someone to kind of help you come back, kind of, I call them unravel those knots in our brains, right? So that way
Mm.
we can see clearly and then go into a space of a healthy relationship. So we understand that repeating this isn't going to give us something different, but going a different route will give us something different.
Right, right. And one of my mentors always says, what's your identity? You know, are you
Ooh.
living the identity of the my identity? And I believe that my identity is a child of God, and I'm a reflection of that. And
Mm,
anything outside of that is a lie. Hence the identity. And I think a lot of people today are invested in their identity, and
yes.
um, they don't even know that it's a identity because that's who they've believe they are all this time based on these
Yes.
unhealthy relationships, unhealthy boundaries. There was a time when I needed so much reassurance,
Mm,
and now being able to stand on my own 2 feet with more confidence. um, you can break these loops, these chains. And like myself, I always thought, well, I'm in this bondage, in this mental bondage, and the door was open. I didn't even know it was open. I was
oh,
able to
wow.
walk through. So I mean, trust me, I've reinvented myself so many times over the years, and praise God, I have been able to give myself grace, like you talk about. In your work, where does God fit into this?
Oh, God is everywhere. It's funny because when I started this my coaching practice in boundary setting, a lot of people started to message me and write me and say, "How are you doing God's work?" I don't think that there's God's work in boundary setting. And I found it very funny because in reality, God is a God of boundaries. God is a God of justice. You know, um, I tend to read the Bible a lot. I tend to read the Word, and for me, that's kind of where I move in. Um, and when you start to look at how God speaks to the Israel, the God's children, He takes them to Mount Sinai right after He liberates them from Egypt, right? And He sits down and says, "You are going to be my people, but in order to be my people, I have to set some boundaries first." And that's where
Sure.
we get the 12 commandments, right? And Moses goes up into the mountain, as we know, and he comes back and he's bewildered because everything that God had just told him not to do, they were already running rampant and doing it. But you see that the first relationship that God had with his people was saying, "Hey, I want a relationship with you. And in order for us to have more intimacy, I need you to follow this so we can both respect each other." So in reality, boundary setting is really, really godly ordained. It's in there. It tells you, do not give your pearls to pigs. Why? Because they can't understand the value of it. There has
Mm,
to be a boundary, right? If people don't receive you, dust your feet off and say goodbye. There comes a moment that you have to let things go and move on. There has to be a boundary, right? Then we go into, I think, is Ecclesiastes, where you start to understand there's a season and time for everything. That means there
mhm.
has to be a boundary, a time to cry and a time for joy, a time for death and a time for life. There's a boundary. So I realized the more that I started to read the word and started to have a relationship with God, that it was actually almost a sin not to have boundaries because you're not
Oh,
being a good steward of the
yes.
resources, of the time, of the talents, and the gifts that God has given you. So when you start to see it from that mindset and you mind shift into that, you're like, "God, you're all over boundaries. And I need to
Right.
implement them because you love me enough," right? And there's another Bible verses that says, "Do not mix old wineskins with new wineskins, for they will
Yes.
burst," right? And so again, there's another example of another boundary. So when we start to move in that, we understand that God is a God of justice, of grace, and mercy, but there are boundaries. And if we step into that, we will see more provision, we will see more financial
Mm,
success, we will see more resources and time for our families, ourselves, and the ones we love, and we will see our businesses grow and other things that we're doing and investing in because we're honoring that. That's the same thing. And one thing that I really loved was, in the beginning, God made the earth, right? And it said on the sixth day, he rested. He had a
mm.
boundary. He said, "I could work and do all those things," right? This is God of creation. He still understood that there was a time that he needed to place for himself. So that is what I try to teach my clients when they kind of worry. Is this something that I'm doing? I feel like being godly is giving all of me. And I'm like, that is not biblical. And that is not
Mm.
what God says. He actually says you need to have good, set, healthy boundaries.
Wow, wow. And it's like there's not one side to a coin or one side to a piece of paper with boundaries and freedom. It's both sides. And within the boundaries, you have abundant freedom. Like you could
Yes.
do everything within the boundary. So,
Yes.
I mean, I hope everybody got something from that. And that was a beautiful explanation. And I can't even believe it that we are just about done here. And I want
Oh,
people
wow.
to know where to contact you. And I mean, gosh, just talking here, I've learned so much. And, it's not just about learning, it's about doing and implementing. And it sounds like, Amira, that you help people become the person who can exercise the boundaries. Because if you have no boundaries now, but you want to have boundaries, who do you need to become to be able to handle the boundaries? And it's not so
Yes.
much what is missing, but what we can add to our lives to be the person who has the healthy boundaries. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes, very much so. Yes, I definitely do, and I thank God that I get to be in this ministry. But that is exactly what I do. I help you recognize those, get into the space of implementing and becoming all the things you know you can through the freedom of the boundaries you create. So beautifully said.
And again, my mentor always talks about be, do, have. When you become the
Mm,
person, you take the actions, then you will have the thing that you desire. So, and
yes,
that too is biblical. So
yes.
I'm happy to share that information with everyone. Where can we get in touch with you? I know you're working on your website, but they could start with social media, right?
Yeah, yes. So the best place to reach me right now is boundaries_coach in Instagram. And then you'll be able to find my link tree on my bio, and you'll be able to have access to my landing page, my upcoming website that's under construction right now, but we're very excited. It'll be launching in February. And you guys will be able to sign up for our newsletters, our blogs, and our upcoming workshops, and all of the upcoming events that I do have this upcoming year. So please follow by at boundaries_coach at Instagram.
And hopefully keep an eye on us because I would love to do something with you. This was so enjoyable. You're
Yes.
lovely, you're beautiful, and
Thank
your spirit
you.
is just so big.
Oh, thank you. You too. It was such an honor. You're so beautiful. Your energy is so healing. And
Thank
I
you.
love your vulnerability, and your content is so, so healing as well. So thank you. It's
I
been such an honor.
appreciate that. Also, folks, I have a free PDF called How to Feel Better with Less Work. Seriously, that's the name. I keep forgetting the title, but I can send it to you. I need your email, but I'll send you the PDF and you can start on this journey of creating healthy boundaries by creating a healing home and a healing body, changing your mindset, and experiencing God. So I hope you all ask for that free PDF. And we're done for the day. Another beautiful conversation. Appreciate you being here. And we'll be seeing more of you, Amira. Thank you so much. See you
Thank you
next
so
time, you
much.
guys.
This has been Taking Healthy Back with your host, Maria. Tune in each week as Maria will empower you to put your wellness in your control. Right here, Fridays, noon Eastern, on the Bold Brave TV network.